Our family policies have been adapted in many countries. I would like to ask you, Agnes, how would you describe the core principles that underlie Hungary's family policies?
Basically, it has two main fundamental elements. One, that we called the family policy turnaround. This is the change of mindset. We would like to emphasize to the nation that family is the basic. And everything grows from the families. So we have to strengthen the families. And the second element of the family policy, of course, the measures. During these 13 years, we introduced more than 30 measures helping the families in the whole life path, starting from babies, youngsters, young parents, elder people. So these more than 30 elements of the Hungarian family policy measures cover the whole life path, and three main pillars it has. One is that we would like every desired child to be born. This is the most important. Second one, we would like to give financial stability to the families. And the third one, we would like to give freedom of choice to the families to enable them to be at home with the kids if they would like to, or they can go back to the labor force if they would like to. I think, in very brief, this is the magic.
It's not always that we welcome a prominent leader of civil society from Africa. And I would like to ask you to talk about the state of the family in South Africa, because I've heard that among several problems, unfortunately, the disintegration of the traditional family also arises.
South Africa, as you would know, was the focus of the world's attention in the 80s and the early 90s. And then the story is that we have achieved this miracle in the transition that have happened after the Berlin Wall, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and ever since, it seems the world has stopped paying attention to South Africa. An interesting thing is that where the fall of the Berlin Wall, and I'll bring this to families now, but where the fall of the Berlin Wall signaled communism being discredited in much of the world, in South Africa it signaled the advent of communism or socialism. And so South Africa is very relevant, and we believe that the world will be focusing on South Africa more in the years to follow for two reasons. The one is the failing or the failure of South Africa, which is measurable on every conceivable measure. And then also, which says to us that the ideas that underpinned this new South Africa seem to have been wrong. And the other reason why it's very significant is the communities such as ours and some others who are still able to flourish in these hostile circumstances where we are being discriminated against. And the reason why we do this, or the reason why we are able to do this, is through strong institutions and strong families. And to get to your question, South Africa has a very big problem in terms of family structure and healthy families. I read a recent news report in one of the main outlets in South Africa, which said, here's the title, it's the heading to this news report is, only 25% of children are part of a nuclear family, and it's not a bad thing. So South Africa has, but the thing is, South Africa is diverse. We have many different communities. Some communities, such as ours, have very strong family structures, and we believe this is the reason why we are successful. And some communities are completely deteriorated in family structures, and there's a direct correlation between the prospect of the community in terms of its cultural richness and success and the health of their family structures.
I think I am well old enough to remember a time when protecting kids and supporting families was not a left versus right issue. Socialists, conservatives, liberals agreed at least in one thing, that family is an entirely valuable human institution that produces or gives the best chance for children to grow up into healthy, happy, prosperous adults. What went wrong? Why do we suddenly have to fight these fights with the left?
If I can start, I think I would say part of the problem, if the question is what went wrong, I would say the answer is a very long answer, and there are many things that went wrong, but I think one of the most important aspects thereof is the world has become too consumed by ideology. Our struggle, to use that term currently, should not be one of choosing which ideology is best. because at its core, an ideology is a theory that seeks to tell us how the world ought to be constructed. And so our choice should rather be one between ideology on the one hand and a recognition of reality and human nature on the other hand. And as we know, families are, if we talk about human nature and nature, then families is the very core of human nature, that as Aristotle has said, and all these ancient Greeks and these ancient philosophers and many through the ages have said, that we are by definition family creatures. We are given our identity by our families, but we have, especially since the Enlightenment, and a lot of good things came out of the Enlightenment, but since the Enlightenment, the world has become consumed by pursuit of different ideologies. And an ideology such as individualism taken to the extreme has led to a situation where we regard ourselves primarily as individuals that can easily be detached from our communities and our families, as if we are not, as if our identity and who we are is not shaped by our families and our communities in a way that cannot be disconnected. But we seem to believe, in terms of these modern ideologies, that we can simply disconnect the individual from his community and his family. And that, taken to the extreme, I would say, is one of the big reasons why there's such an assault on families today.
I think in this big globalization world, the fundamentals, such as family, just changed. Our core values are changing, and not every time in a good way. And this is the case in terms of the families as well. So the family as a value changed. And what we have to do now, what we are doing here in Hungary, is to support the families, to put them into the middle, to say what was just said, that a family is a man and a woman, and because this is biologic, and we have to get back in a very simple way, family again back to fashion.
Among many other things, among the fundamental building blocks of society, among the basic unit where society reproduces itself, an important economic element, family businesses have raised many countries. Among all those things, it's also an expression of the human will to live, the human struggle against everything that is dark. What kind of an ideological transformation do you need, or do we need, to awaken the inner life instinct of our societies? And would that help us stop declining the West as it is?
I think, in a way, this goes back to the earlier comment that we should not seek to replace a bad ideology with a good ideology, but rather to return to reality. And yes, we all have ideological predispositions and so forth, but I also think in terms of how we think about families, we, as an international conservative movement, of course, we're not homogeneous, we have different views, and which is a good thing, and different cultures, and that diversity should be cherished, and that's actually what it could mean to say we have strength in diversity, is to recognize diversity of cultural preferences and so forth. But we are in a hostile environment. Even Hungary, which is regarded as, in some ways a capital of conservatism, and Hungary is being attacked, and we're all being attacked where we are in different ways. And I think it's also important for us, again, to go back to these natural identities and so forth, but also not under these hostile circumstances to succumb to the temptation to define ourselves by what we are not. In other words, to say, we are conservative, that means that we are not woke. Or we are conservative, that means that we are not communists, or we are not socialists. That seems to suggest that these things are the status quo, and we are somehow the odd ones out. We are somehow the strange ones. And I don't think that's the way we ought to look at it. We should define ourselves by our cultures and our traditions and our heritage that we wish to preserve, and recognize that there is an assault on these things, and particularly the family. And if I might add, I think we also we are tempted, because of demographics and all of these things, to put a very strong emphasis on having more children, which of course is necessary. Of course that's important. But if we think of families primarily or exclusively in terms of having more children, then we lose the more important aspect of what the role of the family ought to be. And I'd like to quote just one sentence from Dani Goosen, who's a very well-known and a leading Afrikaans philosopher, who said that families which seek only to guarantee material survival for a people can no longer be considered families in the proper sense of the word. Our families make up who we are. A family is not an instrument to have more children so that we can win the demographics game. Of course, the demographics game is very important. We know that in South Africa especially. So I'm not saying that's not important, but the family has a higher status than only being an instrument in an ideological struggle. I think that the most important lesson we have learned as Afrikaners or Boers in South Africa under current circumstances is the importance of building institutions that are, as we say, state-proof. In other words, that if the government turns against you, that they don't take your institutions with it. So that your institutions are community institutions, they are managed by the community and driven and managed within the context of the institution, and that they can protect the community from the government if needs be.
I think every government have to decide how they would like to solve the demographic winter problem. We here in Hungary 13 years ago chose the way that we support families and put them into the center. They are the core value, they are the fundamental, and we support them as much as we can. And this is how we would like to solve this problem. And I think the decision has to be made by every government.